Joining us now is Dr. Ofer Levy. He's a voting member of the FDA vaccine panel, director of the Precision Vaccine Program at Boston Children's Hospital. It's great to have you back on the show, Dr. Levy. Welcome.
Always a pleasure, Sarah.
So my question is sort of a public health one. In your opinion, now that we can vaccinate kids 5 through 11, can they modify, adjust, get rid of the quarantine guidance for kids that they have to quarantine 7 to 14 days upon exposure to COVID, which hurts parents, the economy, people's jobs, and of course, education?
Well, thank you for that, Sarah. That's a very logical question. I think, we just had the FDA decision this afternoon. And as you know, now it goes to the Centers of Disease Control, or CDC, and they'll have a committee that will meet early next week. And then Dr. Rochelle Walensky, the head of CDC, will make the final determination, and that'll help provide guidance. And so let's not get ahead of the process. But your question is a good one. And we're going to see, number one, how CDC frames their decision. And number two, how is the uptake of this vaccine among 5 to 11-year-olds?
Question for all the parents out there like me who are wondering about kids who have already had COVID, and many kids, millions of kids have now in this country. Like so many other, my kids had mild cases, thankfully, and they recovered. Do we know anything about the long-term immunity that kids have from COVID and whether they need to get vaccinated? And do the risks outweigh the rewards?
So that's an interesting question, and depending on the locality, a greater or lesser percentage of children will have already been infected with coronavirus. There are ongoing studies about the durability of immunity after natural infection. Obviously, it gives you some immunity in adults and younger individuals, but that doesn't last more than a few months, and certainly it's possible to get reinfected. And this is one of the reasons that people who have recovered from COVID, it's still recommended that they receive their vaccine. The vaccine is a much more standardized approach to protect them.
Dr. Levy, to flip it all on its head slightly, this is obviously an emergency use authorization, and I wondered to what extent there is an emergency level of need for 5 to 11-year-olds to get vaccinated. I totally understand how inconvenient it is, given school attendances and rules all around that. But it's also fair to say, I think I'm right, that very few 5 to 11-year-olds die from this disease.
That's absolutely correct, Wilf. And that came through in our discussion last week. To the extent that coronavirus kills in this country, it's mostly been killing elderly and older individuals. And so a logical question could be asked, well, the risk of any given 5 to 11-year-old to die of coronavirus is very, very, very low. Why would we want to give them this vaccine? But a counter argument is, to date, over 700 American children have died of coronavirus, and thousands more have been hospitalized and in intensive care units. And that includes nearly 100 deaths in the 5 to 11-year-old group. And that's a similar level of deaths that has prompted immunization against meningitis and other diseases of children. And moreover, it's likely that the vaccine will help reduce the risk of transmission from children to older individuals, such as parents, teachers, grandparents, who may be at even greater risk of severe COVID.
Another decision that you recently played a part in is that of boosters. And I still don't understand, Dr. Levy, why everyone can't get boosters. In Israel, they're giving them to people aged 12 and over. Why in this country only 65 and over at this point?
Well, thank you for that question, and it's a logical one. This was a couple of weeks ago. Our same FDA advisory panel convened to discuss the matter of boosters, the Pfizer boosters, potentially for everybody 18 years of age and up. And the amount of information available at that time, safety and efficacy for booster, for third dose, in the U.S., for a U.S. population, was promising but limited. And the Ministry of Health of Israel presented their data, which also looked promising. At that juncture, we felt that the benefit risk was strongest for 65 years and up. But I believe FDA will be revisiting this. And at the time we made that decision, the vibe in the room, the discussion was, we will revisit this as more data comes in. And certainly the data out of Israel is very encouraging. And with time, immunity does wane. Those antibodies come down. So I believe there will be reconsideration of potentially boosting at younger ages as well.
Do you think, though, that the delay in a clear decision and mandate on that front might mean that the take-up of boosters is limited, and or perhaps there'll be a good reason why the take-up is limited if we continue to see the Delta variant and others wane in terms of the numbers across the nation?
Well, good point, Wilf. This pandemic is a moving target. Right now, across the country, it's coming down, which we welcome. Nevertheless, yesterday, approximately 1,400 Americans died of coronavirus. Another 50,000 plus were hospitalized in a single day. So this is still a very serious pandemic. We're entering the winter months, and typically respiratory viruses have a seasonality. They get worse when we huddle indoors in closed space, when the weather is cold outdoors. So we might still see it come up again.